So let's show you how this all played out as the president undermined his top medical experts on stage. Once again, they're being forced to push back hard against President Trump's latest suggestions for treating the coronavirus, one of which included, stay with me here, injecting people with disinfectant. The president's ideas, which were rejected by experts in the briefing room with him, came after a Homeland Security official presented research that found disinfectants, heat and humidity killed the virus on surfaces and in the air.
So supposing we hit the body with a tremendous, whether it's ultraviolet or just very powerful light, and I think you said that hasn't been checked, but you're going to test it. And then I said, supposing you brought the light inside the body, which you can do either through the skin or in some other way. And I think you said you're going to test that too. Sounds interesting. Right, and then I see the disinfectant, where it knocks it out in a minute, 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that by injection inside or almost a cleaning? Because you see it gets on the lungs and it does a tremendous number of the lungs. So it'd be interesting to check that. So that you're going to have to use medical doctors with. But it sounds interesting to me. A lot of people have been talking about summer. Maybe this is one of the reasons. I once mentioned that maybe it does go away with heat and light, and people didn't like that statement very much. The fake news didn't like it at all, and I just threw it out as a suggestion. But it seems like that's the case.
It would be irresponsible for us to say that we feel that the summer is just going to totally kill the virus and that if it's a free-for-all and that people ignore those guides. That is not the case.
The president mentioned the idea of cleaners with bleach and isopropyl alcohol. You mentioned there's no scenario that could be injected into a person, is there? I mean,
no, I'm here to talk about the findings that we had in the study. We don't do that within that lab, our labs.
I would like you to speak to the medical doctors to see if there's any way that you can apply light and heat to cure. You know, if you could, and maybe you can, maybe you can't. Again, I say maybe you can, maybe you can't. I'm not a doctor, but I'm like a person that has a good, you know what.
But sir, you're the president.
Deborah, have you ever heard of that? The heat and the light relative to certain viruses, yes, but relative to this virus?
Not as a treatment. I mean, certainly fever is a good thing when you have a fever. It helps your body respond. But not as, I've not seen heat or light.
I think it's a great thing to look at. I mean, you know, okay.
Respectfully, sir, you're the president, and people tuning into these briefings, they want to get information and guidance and want to know what to do. They're not looking for rumors.
I'm the president, and you're fake news. And you know what I'll say to you? I'll say very nicely, I know you well. I know you well, because I know the guy. I see what he writes. He's a total faker. So are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? It's just a suggestion from a brilliant lab by a very, very smart, perhaps brilliant man. He's talking about sun, he's talking about heat, and you see the numbers. So that's it. That's all I have. I'm just here to present talent. I'm here to present ideas, because we want ideas to get rid of this thing. And if heat is good, and if sunlight is good, that's a great thing as far as I'm concerned.
I guess if you could collapse the past 3.5 years of madness into one clip.
That would be it.
That might be the clip.
That's
where
why Fox News or Sean Hannity went crazy on you last night. Probably couldn't even bring himself to start with that.
Well,
he's
been doing it for years. He's got this really strange obsession, and I hope for his sake he gets past it.
But they had to fill time with something beyond that ridiculous claim by the president that he wasted everybody's time with. And you saw Dr. Birx. Ron Fournier had the greatest tweet, "Watch her soul slowly die."
Nothing but respect.
She was so disgusted with him.
Yeah, Dr. Birx and Dr. Fauci, they're hanging in there to try to save lives. But Willie, I knew growing up that with my children that if I would use scrubbing bubbles to clean the bathtub before
you don't eat them.
They got in there, but would not spray it in my children's mouth or in my own mouth if I had a fever or a disease. Like, this is so beyond madness that you have an American president saying such things about putting disinfectant in the body or putting light in the body. It is so beyond parody that if you wrote this for, let's say, Veep, nobody would believe it. And again, not funny, because by probably the end of this month, more people will have died from this coronavirus that Donald Trump said was going to go away, said it was a hoax, that the media's coverage of it was a hoax. Sean Hannity said the media's coverage of it was a hoax. More people will be dead of this so-called hoax that the media was pushing, according to Sean Hannity and Donald Trump, than died in the Vietnam War over the next week. Will probably go beyond 57,000. And again, the fact that we're near the end of April, after losing trillions of dollars,
50,000 lives.
After more lives have been lost here than were lost in both Iraq wars, in the 20-year Afghanistan war, September 11th, the Revolutionary War, the War of... I could stack them up. Donald Trump is now at the point of talking about putting disinfectants in your body and putting lights inside people's bodies, to the embarrassment of those aides sitting on the sidelines listening to this horror show unfold before their eyes.
As we sit here and I listen to you lay it out, I cannot believe we're having this conversation. It's not only embarrassing and dangerous, but as you say, it's a monumental waste of time. A few hours before the president got up there, we learned that 4.5 million more Americans lost their jobs in the last week. More than 25 million just over the last month have lost their jobs. We don't have a national testing program. We don't have all the things that medical experts, public health officials say we have to get through this. And the president is talking about injecting disinfectants into Americans' bodies to cure coronavirus, somehow getting light inside their bodies. I was thinking about Dr. Birx as you guys played that. She spent her life fighting infectious diseases, leading the fight against HIV around the world, spending her life in these serious conversations. And she has to actually entertain the idea of the most powerful man in the world in front of all those TV cameras turning and saying, what do you think about this? And she has to say, well, it's not as a treatment. We can't treat people by injecting disinfectant and light into their bodies. She had to actually say that publicly. So let's see what doctors are saying about this. Another one, expert Dr. Vin Gupta, global health policy expert. We've had him on the show. He says this, quote, this notion of injecting or ingesting any type of cleansing product into the body is irresponsible and it is dangerous. It's a common method that people utilize when they want to kill themselves. That's a quote, John Heilman, from Dr. Vin Gupta, a leading public health expert and an emergency room doctor who's treating coronavirus patients himself. I don't really even have a question for you, John, but what are your thoughts about what you saw up there yesterday?
Well, I mean, you guys have hit the high notes or the low notes. I mean, it's beyond, you know, there's a kind of surreal quality to it, and it's not even like, it's not even an episode of Veep anymore. It really is. You have to be talking about cartoon parodies at this point. The Simpsons you guys played, I think, was right. But I mean, here's the serious thing that a very basic thing, right? You think about how completely divorced from reality the president is. I want to go back to the beginning of the week. We're sitting here on Friday. On Monday, the president of the United States stood up and said, as he was talking about the overall death toll from this pandemic, he said that, you know, it looks like when all is said and done, we're going to be probably at about 50,000, maybe 60,000 when all is said and done, when it's all over, 50, 60,000. That's what he said on Monday, right? We're sitting here right now, it's Friday, and we're at 50,000. The president apparently doesn't know even the basic reality of how many Americans have died. you could never have said on Monday, knowing that we were already in the 40s, thousands of deaths, that you thought that the total number of deaths from this pandemic would be 50, maybe 60. We're gonna pass the 50 threshold today, and we're gonna, and short of a miracle, we're gonna pass the 60 threshold sometime, next week. So the president's utterly divorced from all these realities, and then you get to the delusion. And I think, Willie, to your point, has been an ongoing question throughout since Donald Trump has started taking that podium for a couple of hours a day or 90 minutes a day. Now it's over a month that he's been doing it. People have raised questions. Joe Scarborough has raised this question many times in the course of the last few weeks, which is why do the networks take these ramblings of the president, these insane, misinformation-filled ramblings? Maybe there's some system that we should devise collectively as a news media to not to deny the president a podium entirely, but at least to not take them live, to look at them, have a chance to fact check them, to vet them. It seems to me that the argument for that is now triply strong, because we're now not just talking about giving him a platform to try to advance his political fortunes, but whether it's with hydroxychloroquine and now with these notions of ingesting disinfectants, the president's misinformation is now actively endangering the lives of Americans who are watching him on television, Americans who follow the president's musings, who follow his instructions, who follow the things he's saying, are at risk of killing themselves. And so I think that genuinely we have to have a serious conversation about if the president's going to be saying things like this, not just lying, but lying in a way that could kill Americans. I think people have to really have a serious conversation about whether it is responsible to continue to allow to broadcast these things end to end when the president's on the podium live.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.